Hello YouTube, Fat Man the Beard here. Finally found the time today to do the video I've been promising to do, which is the top 10 most influential horror movies of the last 20 years. I would have had this up sooner, guys, but this really took some research, and I had to go through and eliminate a lot of things and then try and figure out why I kept what I did. But before we get to all that, I want to talk about just one or two things real quick. The first being, as many of you know, I am at 99 subscribers. I'm hoping to hit 100, and then hopefully this week we'll have the giveaway video up, and I'll have more details on this week. Also, at the end of this month, I'm hoping to start, and this has to do with the fact that I didn't have the capabilities, because I have a Flip HD second generation camera. I just picked it up for like 20 bucks, and that's what I've been filming on. But using AA batteries, it just blows through them. Like one 15-minute video will take up a set of batteries. So I finally did get a Flip battery pack for it, so now I can do up to 4 hours of video. Before I wasn't able to do long videos, but now that I can, I'm actually starting my second channel, which is going to be all about conspiracy theories. And that will hopefully start up at the end of March, beginning of April. I do want to stress, though, that this is all for fun. And those of you that are easily offended by conspiracy theories or other people's opinions, just don't subscribe. But if you are, you do have an open mind and you do want to learn things and you want to discuss them through comments and chat back and forth, I really hope that all of you will join me on that channel as well. We're going to talk about a lot of cool things. It is something of a big interest to me, so hopefully that will be up and running probably by the first week in April. But let's get to it. I did have a time with this, and it did take me a little bit of time, but let's get started with this. And these are in no particular order, mostly because they all have their place in the genre, and I'll tell you why, the reasons I picked all of these, but they are in no particular order. But let's start with number 10. And the farthest I went back was, I think, 1996. It was the oldest movie. Most of them were within the last, I'd say 15 years instead of 20 years, but there were there was one actually that fell in that. But the first movie I want to talk about is Jeepers Creepers. A reason I chose this movie was, instead of what Jeepers Creepers brought back to the genre was the creature, which I think creature features had kind of gotten lost. I mean, you did have around the 90s. You had a few. I mean, I wouldn't even call them creature features. You had things like Candyman and a few of others, but those were more supernatural. Whereas Jeepers Creepers was just really a straight up creature feature, and it brought it back in such a great way. And I think that's went on to really not a huge impact on the genre, but I think it definitely has impacted these creature type movies, and we've seen that. I think Are You Afraid of the Dark, which featured these little creatures that ate teeth and lived in the wall, or actually they lived in this furnace down the basement, and it was directed by Guillermo del Toro, and that was a really great movie. And I've always loved creature films, things that there's no explanation for why these creatures exist, or and especially with Jeepers Creepers, there was really no like super big origin story about him. He just was there, and he had so many different weird components. I mean, he was human-like, and then there was this bat-like, and he was just sort of this weird creature. And I really loved that, and I wish we would have went on to make more of those, but they didn't, unfortunately. But I really think that went on to spur people to do more just straight-up creature-type movies, as I felt that was a really important film in that respect. And number 9, I'm going to have to go with Scream, because I think Scream was one of those films where at that time, in 1996, I think the horror genre was really bad in the 90s, in my opinion. I mean, there was definitely some good stuff in there, but it really lacked. And I think what Scream did was it brought back this, it reinvented the slasher genre for sure. And then referencing other horror movies within the horror movie. And it clearly was poking fun at the genre, and it did break a lot of the slasher flick rules, and it just paved the way for new slasher flicks to come and really redefine that genre. So, and I think most people will agree, Scream really did redefine how we looked at slasher flicks and how they were made. And I feel like that's really one of those, you know, if I had to pick a top 5, and those, you know, in order, that would definitely be like, you know, within 1 or 2 spot, because I feel like Scream was just one of those films that made such a huge impact in the horror genre. Let's get on with it. Number 8. I'm going to go with Shaun of the Dead. And I think most of you know why. Shaun of the Dead, what Shaun of the Dead did was it brought back the comedy to horror, but still kept it. I mean, if you still watch Shaun of the Dead, it's still a pretty gory for its time, and it's still a solid zombie movie. I mean, it's still in my top 10 zombie movies. But what it did really was bring back that comedy aspect, and you can see that in films like Zombieland, where they had sort of this comedic aspect to it and brought that sort of campiness back to the genre. But and obviously Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are really great at what they do and their craft, and they really understood, and they still do. They still really, although they've had some flops, that they still they understand the genre. They're fanboys themselves, and they really get it. So I think that definitely is one of those films that's really important to the horror genre. But yeah, I think that's enough said. I think everyone gets that one. I will go with the next one. I'm going to go with number 7, 28 Days Later. And I think what 28 Days Later did was usher in what I would call is the new wave of zombie, and the obsession with zombies. I think up until that point, I mean, there was clearly zombie films before it. I mean, and still going on at the time, but after Return of the Living Dead in the 80s sort of passed, and Romero's movies sort of passed, the zombie genre just sort of died out. And I definitely think that 28 Days Later revived that phenomenon of zombies, and it also introduced fast zombies, which had never been done before, and so that was totally new to everybody, and it brought in a very much more vicious and extreme zombie sort of movie, and it was filmed beautifully, and I think this is where you kind of get the look of things like The Walking Dead and things like that from that film. But I think that's definitely what spurred on this big. I think that is the focal point of where the zombies genre came from, or came back from. So yeah. Number 6, I'm going to go with, and this is a strange one, I think, but, and a lot of people may not get this, but I think American Mary, and it's by the Soska twins, and they're definitely up-and-coming horror makers. They're going to make, I have a feeling they're going to go on to make some really great horror. And American Mary, if you haven't seen it, is a newer film. I think it came out 2 years ago. Yeah, I think it came out 2 years ago. And what a great film. But this was a film that, and I think, and I've seen this in, if you haven't seen The Tall Man, which is a Pascal Langier's film. He's a French director. But what The Tall Man and what American Mary did is taking, and not that this hasn't been done before, but I think it's much clearer in both of those films, is taking social problems. If you haven't seen The Tall Man, spoiler guys, it's addressing the issue of child abuse and child neglect and being able to take care of children. And I think this American Mary is very much talking about the state of America and how looks are so important, and beauty, and pushing the limits of that, and it, you know, all this plastic surgery and these people on the internet trying to look like other people, or trying to look like a Barbie or some kind of manga anime type woman. And so that's, I definitely think they picked up on that and was like, okay, we can do something with this, we can address this. And it's a really great film. It's very grisly, and some of the special effects and the makeup is just amazing in that film. It's very grotesque. And within it, I think that other movie, within American Mary, there's it touches on other things, you know, using roofies to, you know, rape women, and it's just there's a huge, you know, feminism. There's a bunch of things that this film really addresses, and does it in such a manner that is so subtle and so just brilliantly done. And I really can't wait to see what else those women do, because they're very, very talented women. Let's move on. Next one I'm going to go with, and I think this one is pretty clear as well, is Human Centipede. And what the Human Centipede, I think, brought back was, you know, these mad scientists. You know, it's a mad scientist movie, really, is what it is. And it's a kind of, in a very grotesque, and I think that what it really brings back is just these very demented films of, like, and it's kind of a nod to, I want to say it's a little bit of a nod to, you know, some of your more mid to late 80s type things like Reanimator and just these bizarre 80s films that you had, like Bad Taste, and just these very bizarre films, but also a nod, I think, to something like Frankenstein, where you have somebody who's like trying to create something, but it's done in a very depraved way. And I think Human Centipede obviously set it up for films like, and I absolutely know it is. It's set up, you know, the inspiration for things like Tusk, you know, these human experiment type things and such. So I think that definitely had a big impact on the genre for sure. And I think most of you will agree. The Human Centipede was one of those films that a lot of people, you know, even if they weren't horror fans, they still watched it. That curiosity was still there, and I think that really is definitely a reason for this film to be in here. And I really loved the first one. The second one was just shocking, and I typically don't like that. Let's see. We'll go with number 5. I'm going to go with Insidious. And I think the reason I chose Insidious is because there's just been a string of these supernatural, haunting, possession type films, and most of them are so boring and stupid, and bring nothing new to the genre, except for it's just the same formula. Whereas this film came out of nowhere, had really it really wasn't advertised that well. There wasn't a lot. It was just kind of this underground thing for a while, until people started, you know, kind of catching up with it. But what it really brought back was scary, especially in a haunting film. It brought back scary, and the astral projection idea. It brought in a fresh idea to the genre. And I equally liked Insidious 2. I thought it was a great film. Not probably it had the same impact, but I still thought it was equally as good as the first one. But I think really that one, and I would almost maybe put The Conjuring in there, although it's pretty formulaic. But it's kind of a return to making hauntings and possession movies scary again. And I definitely think they hit the nail on the head with Insidious. It takes a lot to make me jump or kind of get scared or get goosebumps. And that movie, the first time watching it through, in the dark, nonetheless, and by myself, really gave me the creeps. And that takes quite a bit for me. So I definitely think Insidious was one of those movies that's bringing back that scary. It's putting the bar up here of, like, this is where you need to be as far as giving me a good scare. So, yeah. Alright. Let's move on. that puts us down to... I lost count, guys, here. Well, anyway, I got 3 left here I want to talk about. And so number 3, I want to talk about Saw. Saw is another one, I think, and I'm only talking about the first film, maybe the second film, but that would be it. The rest of them are just Saw for the sake of Saw. Not that they're horrible films, but the first film, and this, once again, too, is this made, I want to say slasher flicks, but it brought back the costumes, you know, the pig mask and the cloak and all that, and that jump and that scare factor of, like, you know, and it brought back just a fresh twist to the genre of, like, you know, it had a twist ending to it. It was grisly. It was insightful. It had a little bit of everything. It had a little bit of social awareness. You know, the fact that, you know, you shouldn't waste your life and you shouldn't do bad things and things like that. And it brought back crazy. I mean, this guy just went off the edge, and laying there on that floor for hours and hours on end, and then to just get up at the end and walk away was just like, wow. Saw was one of those definitely that had a huge impact. I mean, I'm sure it had a huge impact on everyone, especially the people, you know, to go on making horror films. That was, and I can't stress enough, really just the first one that really redefined the genre as far as, wow, this has so many aspects. I mean, you have Billy, the little guy that comes out on the, you know, tricycle, and so you've got this character, you've got a character, like, almost I would relate to, like, Jason or Freddy, of, like, he's instantly recognizable, and then you've also got Jigsaw, who's the killer, the serial killer. So really, it redefined serial killer movies, and then it also put in this, you know, you've got a face behind it, and then the pig mask and the cloak, and it was a very complex storyline, and I really loved that film, especially the first one, and I definitely think that's gone on to have a huge influence on the genre. So yeah, number 2, and this one I talk about a lot, and I just don't know why more people aren't talking about it, or why they talk badly about this film, and that's House of a Thousand Corpses. Now, I get it. Rob Zombie's films have not always been on point. I actually loved his reimagining of the first Halloween. I thought the first Halloween was great. The second Halloween, obviously, he was contracted to do that. He did not want to do Halloween 2. He was forced by the film. You know, he was under contract. The film company wanted it done. He was really against it. He was really upset about it. He wanted to make, which has been scrapped, and I'm not sure why, which is a movie called Tyrannosaurus Rex, which was going to be about a group of outlaw satanic bikers that were chasing down a family in an RV. And I thought, wow, that would have been such a great film. But he ended up having to scrap it, and I don't know why, but he ended up making Halloween 2. And that's unfortunate, because Halloween 2 was not very good. And like I said, a lot of people don't like his films, but I think House of a Thousand Corpses was one of in my opinion, maybe one of the best horror films to come into the genre in a long time, because there's just so much. I mean, I could talk about this film for hours. It really is such an incredibly great film, and the acting is just superb. Ziegfeld is just on point in every aspect of this film, and as well in The Devil's Rejects, although Devil's Rejects is definitely not as much of a horror movie as it is an outlaw movie, and that's for another whole other discussion. I wouldn't even group The Devil's Rejects in horror necessarily. But what this film brought back was that 80s and late 70s, middle to late 70s feel, especially the 80s. His use of color, his use of lighting, everything in that film is for a purpose, you know, and just bringing back so many aspects to horror that we're missing. You know, he created his own, you know, mythos, so to speak, within it, and it's just one of those just so amazingly done, and so stylish. I'd almost relate it to if Quentin Tarantino had done a horror film. this is definitely, I think, what it would have looked like, or very similar to it. It's that auteur, director of like, this is mine, this is wholly mine, and you know, definitely one of those directors who very much gets the genre and is a fan of the genre. So many times I feel like horror movies are made by people who don't necessarily understand the genre or as big of a fan of the genre. Whereas I think Rob Zombie is one of those people who very much gets it and gets what works and what doesn't work. Now, there was The Lords of Salem, which, not very good. It does show him growing as a director, I think, and it's definitely, he definitely has learned a lot, and there's definitely like a Polanski feel to The Lords of Salem in a lot of the shots, and he's growing as a director, and I'm really excited to see his upcoming movie, 31, which is started to film, and so I'm very excited for that. But yeah, House of a Thousand Corpses, there's so many things. I mean, it's definitely a nod to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween. There's a definite nod to a lot of these movies, especially in just the way things look, the choice of even, the car they're driving in, the way the gas station looks, the way the house looks, Dr. Satan and that whole scene down there. I mean, come on, if you're a huge fan of horror and you don't understand why this film is so important, then you really don't have an appreciation for the genre. I don't know what else to say. It's a very well done film, and it probably is my favorite horror film now. Before that came out, I don't really know. Probably one of the Nightmare on Elm Streets was probably one of my favorite films. But like I said, that's just one of those I think that most people just haven't really appreciated yet. And I think, in another 10 years, they'll definitely look back on that one and say that was a defining moment in horror film genre. So, yeah. All right, let's get on to the last one, and that is, and I hope I'm saying this right, it's Pascal Langers. Anyway, if you guys know how, I don't know how it's pronounced, but he did a very shocking film called Martyrs. If you haven't seen Martyrs, it's a very difficult film to get through, but probably one of the best opening scenes for a movie I've ever seen in my life, as far as horror film. Spoilers here, guys, for sure. The beginning scene shows this woman coming in and just shooting this family up with a shotgun, but it's done so well, but it's very shocking. It's a very shocking scene. It's very brutal, but the opening scene is one of the most amazing scenes for a horror film I've ever seen, because it is so intense and brutal and well shot. But it's a very dark, and there's very dark subject matter. I mean, the whole film is very dark and depressing. It's very difficult to get through. And this is one of those, what they classify as the new wave of horror, new wave French horror. And definitely the French are very much pushing, it seemed to be Asian films were pushing the boundaries, maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s, but definitely the French new wave horror has just come out of nowhere and blown it way out of the water. That Martyrs is probably one of the most difficult films to get through. But if you make it to the end, it's another one of those. There is a little more to this film. It's got some really existential sort of topics towards the end. I'm not going to give too much away, but I would definitely highly recommend it. The beginning will flow a little better, but the mid to end section it drags for a while, and it's very difficult to get through because it is so brutal. But the end is a big payoff, and if you can finish it, you'll understand why. This movie really resonated with me and stuck with me for several weeks after. Not many films stick with me enough to where I'm thinking about it kind of for the next couple weeks on a daily basis of like, wow, this was a really intense film, and it made me really, really think about things. And I think if you watch it, you'll understand. Those of you that have seen it will probably understand what I'm talking about. Very few films leave me like that. But yeah, that's my top 10, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this film. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. If there was something I missed, tell me what you think I did, that I nailed wrong, or what I missed, or anything. Just leave me any kind of comments, guys, and we'll get a discussion going here. I really love horror, and I do, and like I told everybody in a previous video, that I have a lot of fans subscribing to me. They're big horror fans, and I really love horror, and I'd like to start doing a little more about horror films and the genre itself. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you later.